Friends, have you ever thought about moving? I think it would be a big moment for anyone. Literally everything changes. Your job, your everyday routine, the people you know. And for me as an architect, the most important thing is that the house you live in changes too. So my family, Galia, Mikalina and I, moved to America 2 years ago. In Belarus, we left behind a really beautiful and comfortable house that we had just built with our own hands and only got to live in for about half a year before we had to leave. But it was a great and memorable experience, which I talked about in detail in one of the videos on our channel. If you haven't seen it yet, make sure to check it out after you finish this episode. And actually, that house I built was a kind of big personal experiment for me, and it taught me a lot. Because for an architect, their own home is a reflection of their worldview and their work. You want to make this house your calling card, to thoughtfully build your ideas into it, so that sometimes clients aren't willing to take the risk, but you really want to implement these ideas and show that they work great. Of course, not everything worked out right away. On the first try, or exactly as planned. But I think the result turned out great, like it usually does. The idea behind the house was to create something like an earth-sheltered home, you could say. It's a house that's hidden from the access road but completely opens up toward the inner courtyard with large panoramic windows looking out onto a beautiful lot. And actually, I really believe that building this house helped our business, giving us valuable experience and opening up new opportunities. And today, I'm not afraid to say it, we are without a doubt the most influential architectural studio in Eastern Europe in the field of private design. We really build large-scale projects. Houses of about 16,000 square feet, even entire settlements. For example, we have a settlement with 35 individual houses. It's an enormous scale, and honestly, 5 years ago I probably wouldn't have believed that such projects were possible. That's why after moving, I immediately started thinking about building my own new house in the USA. And it was quite a challenge, because I had never been to New York before. I had no idea where the expensive neighborhoods were or where the cheaper ones were. I didn't even understand the general principles of construction. For the first 6 months, I mostly just lay on the couch, scrolling through listings online to see what was for sale in the area, just to get my bearings and better understand the market. Only after that did I start visiting lots in person and checking out specific options. I should mention, it didn't really matter to me exactly where to build the house because all of my work is remote. This allowed me to expand, so to speak, the area where I was searching for a place to live. And after a long exhaustive search, carefully looking at dozens of different lots, I finally came across a really good one. It was a beautiful plot of land in Connecticut, not too far from Manhattan, with a great school rating and, most importantly, a very reasonable price. Land in this area usually costs an absolutely astronomical amount. Just so you get an idea, good lots in a block neighborhood usually start at $500,000. That's crazy money. So when I found something several times cheaper, I was thrilled and bought it right away without thinking twice. So I won't keep you in suspense either. Let's go take a look at the lot, and you can judge for yourself whether it's a good purchase or not. Let me give you a few general facts about the lot. It's located in Eastern Connecticut and it's 1.5 acres. That's not too big and not too small. It's a standard-sized lot, the kind they usually divide up in this state. You can see there are neighbors around, but that's actually a good thing. I didn't want to live in the woods. I really like the nature around here. It's very beautiful here and the terrain is really hilly. And you can see that from my lot. The elevation change is just crazy. Thank God some site preparation had already been done for construction. You can see where a potential driveway onto the lot was laid out, and over there is a little area for the house itself. Let's go take a closer look. So now we're walking up to the spot where the future house will presumably stand. You can see the neighbors over here. This is the north side, and it's good that we don't need to put any windows here. This is basically the main view. Here you can see the natural surroundings, and we're situated higher than the other neighbors. And this is the south side, southeast. And over here is the east side, with two neighbors who are basically located along the road. The best thing about this place, and what I personally love the most, is this charming little corner right here. You see, in this spot, the bedrock slightly emerges from the ground, and together with the tall, majestic trees, it creates a really beautiful, natural, almost untouched alpine hill. I truly believe this absolutely needs to be incorporated and thoughtfully used in the design, because it's a ready-made, perfect composition of natural beauty, just waiting to be appreciated and highlighted. Yes, of course there's a slope, it's quite significant on this plot. I can already see that we'll need quite a bit of sand here, possibly even tons, just to level things out a little. Right now, I honestly can't even imagine how much it'll actually cost to lay all the necessary utilities and do all the prep work for the foundation. Here, in this spot, we might even have to blast some of this extremely hard rock just to get to a workable level for construction. But I think the unique, breathtaking beauty of this place more than makes up for it and truly justifies all the effort and expenses. Another big challenge here is dealing with the septic system and sewage, because there's only a very thin layer of soil above this solid bedrock. There's basically nowhere to easily bury that heavy plastic tank for household waste. It's even harder to create a proper filtration field for the treated water, since the ground conditions are so difficult. So here too, you really need to think carefully and plan ahead, where to get the necessary soil and where to move it to make sure the entire system works properly in the long run. And overall, of course, friends, I can see there's a lot of work ahead. Actually, when I first bought the lot, there were about 10-foot tall thickets growing here, and you couldn't make sense of anything. You couldn't tell what the terrain looked like or what kind of lot it was. And only after buying it did I actually organize and tidy it up, carefully clearing out all the weeds and bushes. Of course, it cost a fortune, but now at least I have an idea of what everything looks like and where the house will be situated. When an architect starts designing, the first thing they pay attention to, especially when visiting the site, is which angles the house will look best from, or which angles people will most often see and experience their home from. These are the most important, and the composition of the future building should be designed around them. In my case, it's actually this very angle you're looking from right now, because as you can see, there are tall trees on both sides acting as natural frames, and the house needs to be carefully placed between them. Behind me is the southeast corner of the lot. This is where the house can be placed, and it's basically the most important viewpoint. And it's not just the angle you're looking from, but also mine, because from here you get the most beautiful, inspiring view of nature. In every case, so to speak, it's especially important to design the house and create visualizations from this angle, where it will look its absolute best. And I think that when looking at visualizations, you should focus on this angle, on how the house will be perceived from here. Well, let's head back to the office. Actually, I've already sketched out several different house options and have even settled on the final one. So let's take a moment and hurry up to see what I've managed to design here and what the future house will ultimately look like in detail. So guys, we're back from the lot, and I wanted to take a moment to talk about what can actually be designed here, because this is such a challenging site with lots of possibilities, and on a lot this challenging, you can really design a lot. I honestly had a whole bunch of options, and I struggled for a long time to settle on just one. I decided to start from the original concept because when the previous owner was selling the land, he had actually already gotten approval for a project he was going to build, and all of that was passed on to me. So I chose to base my design primarily on that concept. It was a two-story framed house, clad in siding, pretty standard for this part of American area. My idea was also not to stray too far from this concept of an American house, so that it would remain in context. And the most important thing for liquidity in America is to build a house that doesn't cost more than what your neighbors are building. Otherwise, you'll simply never sell it. The banks won't appraise it for the amount you spent building it. In short, there will be a huge number of problems. The main thing is not to stand out, and that's how my first idea was born. So it was a two-story house, again made up of 3 volumes of different geometry, basically also clad in siding, only vertical siding. I decided to highlight the second floor with wooden shingles. Actually, it was quite a nice option. It also had a particularly interesting solution with two spacious terraces, one facing north and the other south. Thanks to this, you could choose how you wanted to spend your time outside. So, if you wanted to sit in the shade during a hot summer, you could go out to the north side. If you want to warm up in winter, you go out to the south side. But while I was designing it here and thinking about how to build it, the neighbor across the street just built a huge retaining wall next to his house. And actually, it's a good thing I didn't start building because he ruined the specific view, so I decided to completely redo the idea. Then I thought about it more and realized the house ended up somewhat R&B style, not particularly ambitious, and everyone I showed it to would say, well, of course it's not like what you had in Belarus, but it's not bad either. That of course didn't really work for me. That's why I decided to create a completely new version, with fewer compromises, but at the same time it would still fit into the context of the development.
Are you planning to build your own house or make investment projects in Florida or New York? We are a company specializing in modern residential architecture. Let me show you a few of our projects that are under construction now. In Catskill, our project blends seamlessly with the natural landscape, preserving the forest and framing beautiful mountain views. In Belmead, we carried out a reconstruction that allowed the client to raise profit from an investment project. And in Naples, we have made a large mansion with an inner courtyard, pool, bowling, and spa area. It's always an individual approach, guided by the client's lifestyle and supported by modern technologies. Every house becomes a unique story unlike any other. Visit our website, get in touch, and let's start designing your dream house.
This version of the house is single story because that's more convenient, even though it's a bit more expensive. Basically, the design is based on 3 elongated barns. Barns, in my opinion, are some of the simplest building forms to construct, and they're generally very easy to put together. I decided that in America, there should be a house that's really easy to build. Since one barn alone isn't quite enough for the total area needed in a single-story house, I decided to simply clone it into 3 parts and cut them to the required length. That's how the concept of this 3-part barn originally came about. Next, I carefully placed this barn on the only spot on the lot where the land is flat and it's possible to build, which resulted in quite a few necessary retaining walls. And I decided that this concept needed to be continued and strengthened. So I added the same gabion retaining walls to the facades of my building. This way, I basically connected the lot and the overall house concept, hopefully saving some money on construction costs, because essentially all you have to do is fill the metal mesh with the stones that are already on your lot. This combination of gabions made from locally sourced natural stones, sturdy wooden slats and corrugated metal sheets, which will rust over time and only add character to the house, seemed especially interesting to me. So from the outside, what you get is a rather conceptual house with a minimalist shape made up of identical barn houses and unconventional materials used in its construction. For the terrace, I also decided not to repeat the mistakes I made the first time when building my own house. I completely abandoned the idea of wooden terraces. They fade very quickly, get damaged easily, and really require a lot of maintenance. Here I decided to support this slightly carton style, so to speak, roof with simple bricks laid in a herringbone pattern, which helps to continue the idea of the house facades using unconventional materials. Further, there are small canopies at the front of the house that form 3 separate terraces, adding both function and visual interest. The terraces each serve different functions. For example, one terrace is meant for a more private gathering with a hot tub. Its central part is more of a dining area and an extension of the kitchen. And the largest part, I think, will easily fit a comfortable sofa set and a spacious barbecue area perfectly, where you can hang out and relax with a big group of friends. From the perspective of arrival, the entrance area showcases a beautiful and tranquil inner garden, which opens up as a panoramic view from the living room. And in fact, the main entrance to the house is not far from the garage doors, essentially forming a cozy little corner where you arrive and park your car. Speaking of the internal layout, which is quite notable, there's also a rather interesting aspect here. So, I tried to combine American ideas and concepts of home building with my own familiar way of life. That's why it looks like this. So, we arrived by car right into the garage. Naturally, this is a 2-car garage. There's really no smaller option here, so to speak, and we walk into the hall. It's a convenient setup because you come in from the garage in your shoes and immediately step into the wardrobe, but this isn't some rough makeshift closet that you just want to pass through. It's a clean, finished, beautiful space that also incorporates the main doors. Behind it is the laundry room, so it's set slightly apart from the rest of the space, and when the washing machine is running you can't hear it. And there's also a boiler room with a private entrance so that an engineer can come in, if necessary, to take measurements or to repair the house's systems, all without entering the main living area. Next, as is standard, there's a powder room, and then we enter the kitchen. The kitchen here is just slightly separated from the main living area. This design choice was intentionally made for practical reasons, to help keep cooking smells and odors from spreading too much throughout the home, so you can cook comfortably and it's not visible from the main space. The whole cooking process, which isn't always neat and beautiful like in the pictures, right? And at the same time, it's a large, truly huge American-style kitchen, with its large island, a pantry next to it where you can have an extra refrigerator. Overall, everything is very convenient. Large kitchens, in fact, are what really determine a home's main value, surprisingly enough. Next is the dining table, and opposite it there's a beautiful arrangement with a console where you can place interesting paintings and they'll be visible as soon as you enter the house. And in general, this central access, with the dining table and the sideboard behind it. In fact, this is really the main thing, the central focal point, the spot that immediately draws your eye and attention when you first enter the house. So it was especially important to make this arrangement as beautiful and visually appealing as possible. I really like the central part of the living room here because this is exactly where the sofa is placed. It's panoramic in design and faces both directions. One way faces the fireplace area, which helps separate the kitchen from the living room. And the second is the TV viewing area. On both sides it's framed by large panoramic windows. Essentially, you can sit facing any of the 4 directions, and in each direction you get different ways to spend time and different views. It's a really interesting space. I believe it will be the central one. And next to it there is a small home office. This is essentially my workspace. I decided to place it not far from the kitchen because you always run to the kitchen to grab a snack from the office. It's just convenient, right? And downstairs there is a separate block, basically a quiet zone, right? Where the primary bedroom and 2 kids' rooms are located. Basically everything here is pretty standard. That is, there is one shared bathroom for the children and a separate one in the primary bedroom. One interesting feature, which probably isn't very common in America but is something I've always really wanted to include, is a freestanding bathtub. It's almost in the bedroom itself but slightly separated, creating a sense of privacy. And something that's quite common in America, something I see all the time in every house for sale, is a wall positioned directly opposite the bed. In Eastern Europe, it's customary to place beds so they face a beautiful view. It's not very practical, I have to say, because in the morning the sun shines right into your eyes. But it's very beautiful because you fall asleep with a beautiful view and wake up to a beautiful view. It's about aesthetics. In America, it's about functionality. If someone wants to hang a TV, there's a wall opposite the bed for the TV. This hides us from any outside eyes, so it adds an extra sense of privacy. This solution tends to lean more towards rationality. So that's the layout, friends. Be sure to share your thoughts about it. Where there might be any flaws or subtle nuances, it's not too late to fix anything. And we're moving on. In the interior finishing, you can notice the continuity of materials, sometimes even quite literally. The gaping wall is just like the one we use outside, but this time it's in the living room. It's a pretty raw industrial look, very bold, but I think it's going to look amazing and give the space a lot of character. There are lots of natural materials, like planks and some veneered pieces. I tried to strike a balance between eco-friendliness and price, so you won't find any expensive brands here. Most of the furniture will likely be custom made and brought in from Eastern Europe. Whether I'll be able to do it cheaply or not, we'll find out later. To sum it up, the entire concept of this house is essentially a compromise between price and a non-standard approach. In America, anything non-standard is very expensive. So my task is to find a solution that looks really cool and impressive. If you know of any non-standard affordable ideas, be sure to write in the comments whether you think I managed it or not, and share your advice. I'm always open to suggestions and feedback. That's actually why we're all here, to create something truly cool and remarkable together. Without your help and support, it would definitely be harder. As for me, I'll start moving forward with the implementation process. I've already begun working a bit on getting this project approved and have run into a ton of difficulties along the way. I think that will be the topic of our next episode. I'll try to post regular updates on the construction of this house so you can see every stage of the build. But for today, I'll say goodbye. See you next time. Bye.